My goodness, everyone, it is March 25th, and you know what that means? Opening day is 2 days away. My schedule on the work side has finally lightened up a little bit with the NCAA basketball tournament getting whittled down to the Sweet 16. Welcome to Believe in White Sox. It is a Tuesday, whenever you may be listening. We are hoping to have a collaboration podcast tomorrow with Todd from Halos in the Infield, another part of the Believe Network, as the White Sox and Angels will open up their respective regular seasons down at Rate Field on Thursday. I'm hoping to get to opening day, either Thursday or go to the second game of the season on Saturday. Either way, if I don't make it to one of the games this series, I'm not going to be alarmed. It's not going to be too warm on Thursday or Saturday, but Friday it's supposed to be up to 74 degrees. And of course, the White Sox aren't actually playing that day. Such is the life that we lead here. But I want to remind you all, we are going to be more frequent. We are back on our grind here on Believe in White Sox. So make sure that you like my YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you may get your podcasts. Overcast, I know there's a lot of different places. Amazon Music, is Google Play still a thing? I think it's still a thing. But in any event, this is Believe in White Sox. And folks, I want to do this show in terms of evaluating where this roster is going to be at entering opening day. When we talk with Todd, and I hope that that is going to happen tonight, that we will put out tomorrow, we're going to talk specifically about what the White Sox and Angels match up with each other. But this is more of a holistic evaluation of what spring training was. And to me, I've said this from the start, and one of the reasons why, despite my busy schedule, that we haven't recorded a lot during spring training is that what this season is going to be, you cannot microanalyze every single move that is made by this organization in terms of roster construction, because this is not a roster that you can expect to compete this year. That being said, the utmost importance is making sure that you maintain your service time on prospects that are going to be a big part of your team moving forward. I sound like a broken clock when I say this, but it is 1000% the truth. And that is why it did not bother me when the White Sox optioned Colson Montgomery out of big league camp. Colson Montgomery is going to be your shortstop of the future, but he may not necessarily be ready. I think the White Sox proved throughout spring training that he wasn't ready. Colson Montgomery, I believe, hit somewhere in the 200s during spring training. I'm going to look that up right now. But the White Sox are not in a position to where starting his service time is going to do any benefit. Okay, Colson Montgomery only had 9 total at bats. He had 1 hit, which was that home run. In Major League Spring Training, he had 9 total at bats. Now, is that enough of a sample size to make a judgment on a guy? Probably not. But at the same time, if there's enough of a sample from what he's doing in workouts, from what he's doing against live BP, that you can say that this guy's not ready, I totally understand that. And for somebody as young as he is, you don't want to start his service time clock. Now, another guy that got optioned to minor league camp was Chase Meidroth, who was part of the Garrett Crochet deal with the Red Sox in the offseason. Now, Meidroth is a guy that shot his way up through the Boston system and last year made it all the way up to AAA. He was drafted in 2022. Meidroth had a great year at AAA last year. He hit 293 in 122 games. But is it worth starting his service time clock? And the answer clearly is no. His spring training was more significant in terms of a sample size than Colson Montgomery's, but in 41 total at bats, he hit 146. He had 10 strikeouts and 41 at bats. So for a guy that's not a big power guy, he hit 146 and had a strikeout rate of almost 29%, 25% during spring training. So that's a guy that's clearly not ready for the big leagues. But you can look at where the White Sox are and say the talent discrepancy, the talent gap for this organization is significant to the point where it doesn't necessarily matter whether he is or isn't on the roster. The White Sox will be no better or no worse for him not being on the roster. We saw spurts at times from Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz that made us feel like, okay, we're excited for what the future of this rotation is going to be. And then there were other times where both of them significantly struggled. And I have no issue with neither of them starting on the big league roster. Again, service time is what is most ultimately important here. And you would like to think that you have enough serviceable big league pieces to fill out a competent roster. Now, I think when you talk about competent roster, everything has been thrown out the window based upon what happened last year. This White Sox team, rather, I should say, the 2024 Chicago White Sox, basically threw out the window what is a competitive big league roster. I do believe, looking back on it, that last year's White Sox team should have won, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least 10 more games than they did. They should have won 10 more games than they did. But what from last year's White Sox team is still here that can have an impact on this year's White Sox team? The answers are simply the guys that are going to be big league everyday regulars, which is going to be Andrew Vaughn, Andrew Benintendi, Luis Robert, to an extent, Miguel Vargas, who did not have a great impact after coming over from the Dodgers. Really nobody on the pitching side other than Jonathan Cannon. It was interesting to me, though, that Cannon is not going to be the opening day starter. The last time that we did a show, we said he was probably going to be the opening day starter. That honor is going to go to Sean Burke. Now, Sean Burke had an up and down spring training, 4 starts, 12 total innings, 6.75 ERA, gave up 3 homers, 9 walks, 8 strikeouts. Sean Burke, as a big league starter last year, was decent. A 142 ERA in 3 starts, 4 total appearances, gave up 3 earned runs in 19 innings of work. So the former Maryland Terrapin, who was their 3rd round pick in the 2021 draft, is going to be the White Sox opening day starter. Their rotation will be filled out by Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon, Martin Perez, and then more than likely, you're probably going to see the Brewer Rule 5 pick, Shane Smith, end up as your 5th starter. Now, the White Sox acquired Mike Vassell from the Tampa Bay Rays a couple of days ago. He was also a Rule 5 pick. Now, I'm not sure whether or not the Rule 5 rules, no pun intended there, still apply in regards to whether or not a Rule 5 guy that you traded for has to be on your roster the entire season. But he's a bullpen piece. Him aside, we're not going to worry too much about him. But Shane Smith is somebody that I don't know whether or not I want to be excited for him or not. He was, as I look up some of his information here. See, this is the problem. I can't stand when I don't have the stats that I want on tap, or if Baseball Reference decides it doesn't want to load on me right away. This is the problem with trying to do something on the fly when you don't have any printed notes in front of you. And the reason I don't have any printed notes is because my printer broke. Yes, I'm literally blaming my printer, which shout out to Epson EcoTank for deciding that you want to jam every time you try and print something double-sided. Hey, don't get mad at me for trying to save the environment here. All right, I'm trying to be a good citizen and save the environment. So let's not worry about the printer, and let's actually talk about Shane Smith. See, I did a good job of vamping while I pulled up his stats. He had a pretty good spring training. 10 and 2/3 innings of work, 3.4 ERA, 4 walks, 11 strikeouts, a whip of .844. So you look at what he did at Double-A Biloxi last year. He had an ERA of 3.08 in 88 innings of work. Had 5 Triple-A appearances, 6 and 2/3 innings. This was somebody that the Brewers decided that maybe we are not set with him being a part of our 40-man roster. And so the Rule 5 rules for anybody that is not completely aware of them, is if you are a college draftee and you are not on the 40-man roster within, I believe it is 5 years of being in the organization, 4 years of being in the organization, then you are left unprotected and you can be claimed in the Rule 5 draft by any major league team. But that major league team has to keep you on the big league roster the entire year, or else you can be sold back at a minimal price to your original team. So you'll see things happen where teams will have Rule 5 guys on the big league roster and they realize that they're not major league ready players yet. So instead of optioning them back to the minor leagues, they have to sell them back to their original club. So I think the White Sox, though, are in a position to where they like Shane Smith enough at 6'3", 240, guy that throws hard, big body, right-handed pitcher, that even though his highest level of competitive baseball in a regular season form, AAA, he was only out of the bullpen, they seemingly like his ability to be able to start. Now, Will Venable has said that they are going to play this roster all the way down until opening day, which probably means tomorrow morning we're going to actually have our big league roster. But it's interesting to examine some of the things that the White Sox, some decisions that they've already had been made for them. Josh Rojas, I don't know what his status is going to be. He's got a toe injury right now, so there's a good chance that he opens up the season on the DL. It looks like Lenyn Sosa is going to end up as the starting everyday second baseman to begin this season. Brian Ramos, I'm not sure exactly where he fits into this equation, so Ramos probably makes the big league roster, but we shall see when that actually comes out. Mike Tauchman has an injury, which means he's probably going to end up starting the season on the IL as well. Andrew Benintendi, after his early spring training wrist injury, is already back and playing games. I actually can't believe that he was already back playing spring training games. I had assumed when we did our show that he was going to be out by opening day, so he'll be on the roster, but your outfield's going to start off with Benintendi, Robert, Austin Slater, and Michael A. Taylor. And to me, that's a competitive outfield. I still don't love Benintendi. Slater to me is still a platoon guy. I'm not sure where Miguel Vargas fits into all of this, but for the White Sox, they're going to have to decide who their opening day shortstop is going to be, whether it's going to be Jacob Amaya, who is a former Dodgers draft pick. Amaya had an okay spring training. He had 222 and 27 at bats, but he's somebody that was drafted all the way back in 2017. He does not have a ton of big league playing experience. He played in 23 games with the White Sox last season, hit 179. So this is apparently going to probably be the guy that starts opening day at shortstop for the White Sox if Josh Rojas is indeed going to start the season on the IL. So to me, I am curious in terms of what the White Sox are going to do infield wise. Is Miguel Vargas going to end up being somebody that plays a lot of left field and Andrew Benintendi DHs, or is he going to play some more infield? We shall see how the White Sox construct this roster, but it just does not seem like you're going to have an everyday starting nine, or at least that's what I feel like is going to end up happening. So Rojas and Tauchman will have big league roster spots once they're healthy. So that could end up meaning that Jacob Maya ends up getting outright released. I just don't see him as a guy that, if he's not on the big league roster, I'm not sure what the point is in him actually being a part of this team. I would also say that the White Sox catching situation is a little disappointing for somebody that wanted to see the prospects and see the two guys that are going to be big parts of their future in theory in Edgar Cuero and Kyle Teal. Neither of them is going to start on the big league roster. The White Sox catching situation is going to be former Angels first rounder Matt Thaiss along with Corey Lee. And maybe this is the last best run that we see from Corey Lee in terms of will he be somebody that can be an organizational piece for the long term? Matt Theis is a roster filler. He's going to be this team's backup catcher unless he somehow returns to the form that got him to being a number one prospect. Matt Theis is also somebody that I should say can play first base. So there will be times where you have Corey Lee as the starting catcher. If Andrew Vaughn needs a day off, then you end up putting Matt Theis at first base. And Matt Theis is a lefty bat. So there is some sort of platooning action that you can do there as well. Brooks Baldwin, I think, is going to end up playing all over the infield. He's not going to be a starter anywhere, but I think that he's probably going to end up being somebody that if Lenine Sosa is not playing, that Baldwin plays second base. If Jacob Amaya isn't playing, then Brooks Baldwin's playing shortstop. I don't know how this team, without your core guys that you feel like are going to be a part of your future, Will Venable, I think, is going to probably end up playing around with this infield a lot. The outfield, I feel like it's going to be the same collective of guys, but just going into different spots. I had hoped that Oscar Colas was going to have himself a better spring training than he did. Unfortunately, it looks like he is not going to end up being a part of the opening day roster. He hit 250 in 16 spring training at bats, so 4 hits. And again, spring training is something that we just don't have a big sample size for a lot of these guys, and you're getting a lot of minor leaguers that are playing in major league games that have no chance of actually making the big league club. So to me, the White Sox opening day roster will probably look a lot different in terms of like their 26-man roster is going to end up looking a lot different come June 1st than it is April 1st. And that is obviously going to depend on injuries. That's going to depend on where the White Sox are in the standings and the performances of a lot of veterans on one-year contracts and whether or not they get shipped off for parts at some point. Like the White Sox roster construction has been built in a way to where you have a lot of guys, the Austin Slaters, the Michael A. Taylors, the Mike Talkmans, and to an extent the Martin Perez's of the world that, similar to the Paul DeYoungs and the Eric Fetties from last year, that if they have value, they are going to end up being traded for something. Now, if last year's trade track record from Chris Getz is anything, that something is not going to be that significant. And I hope that if these guys outperform what we expect them to perform, that was very bad English right there. If they outperform their expectations, then maybe there's an opportunity for the White Sox to gain something back for them that will further bolster the future of this team. But I look at where the White Sox are right now in terms of what's on this roster that is going to end up being a part of your competitive future. At this point, if Brian Ramos makes it, it's Brian Ramos. And I'm going to say that every member of the starting rotation, save for, say, Davis Martin and Martin Perez, has a chance to be a part of the competitive future. The White Sox, in my opinion, are taking not a big risk, but they're making a statement by having Sean Burke be their opening day starter instead of Jonathan Cannon, who's got a full year under his belt, and Martin Perez, who is a veteran that has been around for some time. Maybe this is Will Venable saying, this is a young guy that we like, and we envision him being a part of the rotation for years to come. So let's give him ball opening day and see what he does with it. That, to me, I feel like it's going to be the most interesting part of this White Sox season and how they seemingly function through the start of a year with a roster that is a mix of journeyman veterans on the position player side, young guys who look to prove themselves on the position player side, and a pitching staff that has absolutely no known quantities other than the quantities that you got last year in Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin over the course of a couple of seasons, and the track record that Martin Perez has. This bullpen, by the way, is a bunch of guys that are just a bunch of guys. And that's simply it. I mean, I remember watching Penn Murphy pitch in college at Santa Clara. He was a 36th round pick that in some ways I never thought would ever have a chance of sniffing past double A, and he's probably going to end up being one of the White Sox seventh inning guys. So we shall truly be marveled at what this White Sox team is when they hit the field. And I'm not expecting a whole lot, but maybe this is a team of guys that comes together and finds a way to scrap out a few wins here or there and make this team at least interesting. What I want to see from this roster is to at least keep our interest. Make us talk about the now and don't make us talk about the future. One thing that I did want to touch on before we said goodbye on this show is the amount of Tommy John surgeries that are going on in the White Sox organization right now, and mainly focusing on that of Drew Thorpe. Drew Thorpe was the most significant piece that the White Sox got from the Padres in the Dylan Cease trade. And to me, it's unfortunate that the White Sox seemingly have an indefinite amount of guys, it feels like, that have gotten Tommy John surgeries during the spring. Drew Thorpe, Kai Bush, Juan Corella, Perlander Baroa, and Blake Larson. This is, to me, very concerning that you organizationally are having big issues keeping your young pitchers healthy. And maybe this is why we're seeing guys like Shane Smith as a Rule 5 pick end up make the roster, because two guys that you had hoped to potentially be a part of your rotation, Kai Bush and Drew Thorpe, are going to basically be out for the entirety of this year. And where do they fit into the arc of the White Sox future at this point? Now, maybe the White Sox are going to end up seeing the Noah Schultzes and the Hagen Smiths of the world eventually make their big league debuts, and those are the guys that are parts of the rotation, and there will be very little opportunity for Kai Bush or Drew Thorpe to work their way back in. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that Kai Bush and Drew Thorpe are still very much a part of the White Sox future. It just stinks that we're not going to get to see that future in real time, that we're not going to be able to see the prospects that this organization traded for that you hoped were going to be the building blocks for your future rotationally. This White Sox pitching organization, Brian Bannister is, and this is really the one positive I feel like from last year. Brian Bannister is trying to overhaul the way that the White Sox do things from a pitching developmental standpoint. And you can take this as a setback, but everything that he said has made a lot of sense in terms of how you want to develop pitching. And the White Sox historically have not been great at quote unquote developing pitching. And here's why I say that. You look at some of the great White Sox starting pitchers of the last 25 years, and a lot of them were either surefire things or guys that you acquired from other organizations. Let's take a look at the '05 White Sox. John Garland and Mark Burley were the only guys that were developed internally. Jose Contreras was a trade. Freddie Garcia was a trade. El Duque was a free agent signing. Chris Sale was a first-round draft pick. Brandon McCarthy was somebody that ended up being more of a success story once he was traded away from the White Sox than he actually was when he was with the White Sox. Gio Gonzalez was developed by the White Sox, but succeeded for other teams at the big league level. Garrett Crochet was a first round pick. Garrett Crochet was somebody that was a surefire thing coming out of Tennessee. Got hurt, but ended up finally finding his footing last year. And by the way, if you want to just cover your eyes, look at what Garrett Crochet did for the Red Sox during spring training. He had an incredible spring training. And if the Red Sox are competing for an American League East crown, then he is going to be a big reason why. So it's unfortunate that the White Sox pitching has gotten to this point, but at the same time, the 2025 season is going to be a let's see what works. Let's see what we have. It's kind of like the comparison that I would use is, let's say that you are starting up a baseball team at a very large high school. Let's just say that this is a complete hypothetical. Let's say that you live in a town that has 4 high schools. And for whatever reason, they decide that they are going to close all the 4 high schools and open up one new mega high school. Now, this is a situation that would never happen, but they hire a coach from Mars. Let's just say that they hire a coach from Mars that is going to come in and coach this new team. Now, where are all of your players coming from? Well, they're coming from the now disbanded baseball teams of the other 4 high schools. This coach has never seen any of these guys play before. And maybe he's got some scouting reports or some video for all of the guys that actually played in these games. He is going to have tryouts for his team. You're taking 4 teams and you're collapsing them into one. So the White Sox, from a pitching standpoint, are effectively having open tryouts. Are you somebody that's worth keeping around for the long term? Now, the White Sox ended up releasing Gus Varland, who had a terrible spring, but a pretty good year out of the White Sox bullpen last year. So the Sox are going to go younger out of the bullpen, which means you're going to get to see the Penn Murphys, the Jordan Leisures, the Fraser Ellards of the world. And now there's other guys like the Cam Boozers who are veterans who are 32 years old, and the Justin Andersons of the world who are of that same age, and you can't really be as excited about them. But at the same time, maybe they are the guys that you find a way to stay competitive with them around. And maybe they are the guys that, if you keep them around another year, they are reliable enough people out of a bullpen to where you can cover up some of your deficiencies in other spots. Like, to me, I want to see young guys developed out of the bullpen, and maybe some young guys turn into starting pitching candidates. But it doesn't matter what age you are or how much money you're making. If you get to the 7th inning and you can have 3 guys that can get you to finish the game, to me, that is all gravy. The key is getting to that spot with the lead. And the White Sox last year could not hold late inning leads. They really missed the presence of somebody like a Liam Hendricks. They missed having a real closer. And I don't think that this team has a real closer at this point. Who are we going to be excited about coming into a game? At this point, I don't know, Bryce Wilson? Is that going to be your closer? I had envisioned Bryce Wilson being somebody that could end up starting games. we truly are in a we're just going to see what pitcher shows up on what day out of the bullpen and see if there's somebody that we can rely upon to keep a lead. Or in many aspects, if you have starters that end up only going 4 or 5 innings in an outing, can you rely on somebody to, if you've got a 3-run deficit, keep it a 3-run deficit and not let it balloon to something that you cannot overcome in the last 3 innings of a ball game? That's the one thing for me with this White Sox team is I want to see if this organization can piece together a pitching staff that can keep you in games. And to go back to the original point when we started this segment, Drew Thorpe was somebody that at his best could keep you in a game, could dominate a game because he's got that good of stuff. But we saw at times last year, we may mention this on earlier shows, that Drew Thorpe would get lit up. But at this point, you take the upside of the good from what you've seen from some of these guys, as opposed to the downside of what the bad is. And what you hope is that every upside that you see this year will be exponentially better than the best upside you saw from guys last year. And on the other side of things, you hope that the downside of some of your unknowns is not nearly as bad as the downside of everything that happened last year. I'm optimistic for improvement is how I'm going to describe it going into opening day. Improvement does not mean improved. If this team wins 50 games this year, that's an improvement, but it's not really improved. What you want to see is remarkable improvement with guys that will be here beyond this year. And there's a lot of guys on the position playing side that will not be here beyond this year. And we'll get into it on future episodes, but I still don't know what is going to come of Luis Robert Jr. by the trade deadline. I had thought that he was going to get traded this spring like Dylan Cease, but that didn't happen. And I'm glad it didn't happen because he's somebody that's actually worth watching when he's playing at his best. So we'll see if there is improvement. But opening day is upon us, White Sox fans. Let's try and be positive. That's all I'm saying. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Believe in White Sox. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube page and our podcast platforms. We will hopefully be back with you tomorrow with a collaboration from Todd from Halos in the Infield to preview the opening series between the White Sox and the Los Angeles Angels. Thanks, everybody.